Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So I hope you're all doing okay. And welcome to our virtual classroom. First of all, we will have a video for this afternoon classroom, a video on the Aldabra reef monitoring. And then Dr. Anna and Emma will do a presentation, and then we'll end with questions and answers. So from Aldabra, we have Dr. Anna, Emma, and Michael. Michael and Emma will be joining us for the question and answers. So before we start, I would just like to remind you to please keep your microphone muted, and also, if possible, to keep your videos off. You'll put them on during, if you have questions during question and answer session. So without any further delay, I will now pass on to Mara for the video.
Thank you, Maria. Can everyone see my screen? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right.
This is Aldabra, one of the world's largest raised coral atolls located in the Western Indian Ocean, one of Seychelles Islands. A UNESCO World Heritage Site managed by the Seychelles Islands Foundation. It is a sanctuary to some very special and rare animals. Its coral reefs teem with life. Aldabra is far away from any large human settlement, being located more than 1,000 kilometers away from Seychelles' main island, Mahé. With a location that makes it difficult to reach and in hospitable conditions, it is spared most of humanity's direct impacts, making it not only one of the world's least disturbed ecosystems, but also an ideal location for scientific research. The only people living here are the 15 team members of the Aldebara Research Station who protect the atoll under the Seychelles Islands Foundation's mandate. An essential part of the team's work is the monitoring of Aldebara's coral reefs and its inhabitants. Although Aldabra is protected from major local impacts, such as fishing and development, it cannot escape the effects of climate change. The first time a long-term marine monitoring program at Aldabra was set up was in 1999, right after the first global coral bleaching event. This program was carried out by researchers from the University of Cambridge who studied Aldabra's reefs annually, until 2008, when piracy in the region prevented them from returning. Following several years of no further marine monitoring, SIF established its Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program in 2013, just before the most recent and so far most severe global coral bleaching event the world has seen. The Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program takes place each year. The team uses diver and video surveys at 12 fixed sites to record the cover of corals and other species on the seafloor, as well as fish diversity and abundance, which allows to assess changes over time. Water temperature and sea level are also recorded, with marine data loggers that are placed on the reefs.
The main aim of the reef monitoring program at Aldabra is to record and understand changes to its coral reefs.
Because Aldabra is so far away from direct human impact, climate change and the resulting rise in sea temperatures are among the main stresses to its coral reefs. But this creates an opportunity to understand current conditions and how reefs respond.
Because of its isolation and minimal human impact, Aldabra can be used as a regional and global baseline to monitor climate change impact on the ecosystem. The marine program for Aldabra was set up to assess the health of the reef and the change over time. This helped SIF with management decision for the site.
This is not only relevant for SIF and the conservation of Aldabra, but it also tells us which conservation actions we can take on reefs elsewhere that will help make reefs persist through the climate crisis.
After the devastating coral bleaching of the late 1990s, 2016 saw many of the world's coral reefs, including Aldebra's, suffer from yet another major bleaching event, which caused widespread and severe damage.
And what we know and found through the monitoring is that the outer reefs of Aldabra, so the seaward reefs, experienced a higher coral mortality. It was about 50 to 60%, whereas the reefs inside the lagoon had a coral mortality of around 34%.
The 2016 bleaching event, therefore, created an opportunity for the Seychelles Islands Foundation to make use of the Aldabra Reef Monitoring's baseline data and record not only the bleaching of the reefs, but also their recovery.
So in 2019, only 4 years after the bleaching event, the reefs inside the lagoon were almost back to what they were before the bleaching event in terms of coral cover. And although also the reefs on the seaward side are recovering, recovery is slower. And this is most likely related to the different environmental conditions that we have on the seaward reefs and also inside the lagoon, which are related to what kind of species we find of corals, how they are adapted to variable temperatures and such. Very exciting findings and a very important baseline for further research into reef resilience.
With Aldabra being Seychelles' largest marine protected area and one of the largest in the Western Indian Ocean, it is vital that its marine program collects high-quality, regionally comparable, and readily available data, which not only contributes to the protection of Aldebra's coral reefs, but also Seychelles and the region's blue economy. Consequently, the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program is a brilliant example of turning challenges into opportunities.
We are collecting valuable data that are essential for the fulfillment of Aldabra management objective. The Aldabra Reef is near pristine, and studying the Aldabra Reef will give a good understanding of the marine biodiversity. Storms have become more frequent, the sea level is rising, the water temperature is increasing. And I think it is very important to continue with the Aldabra Reef monitoring. And the staff who are being trained here on Aldabra also benefit when they return to Mahe to work with other organizations to share their knowledge and experience of Aldabra.
For 2 years, I was the senior field research assistant then. My duties were mostly to take part in the marine research. I believe that the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program is important because it offers a unique source of information for research. Aldabra is quite isolated. It has a long history of conservation. It is the ideal place to form a baseline because of the very limited human impacts that we have there. So it can be used to compare other effects around us.
Another who contributed to the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program is Stefanie Magi. She was on Aldabra during the 2015 bleaching event, having a front row seat while collecting data and gathering key experiences.
was something very interesting because it was totally different because I'm used to being on land, doing like the other monitoring. So it was something to learn about and also to kind of understand what we were doing also. My current position is a research technician at SFA. It has helped me because I was not very comfortable in the water because I used to panic because I was not used to like encounters with sharks, because on Aldabra this is something that you get a lot, like encounters with sharks. And from being like in the water doing the reef monitorings, it has helped me be comfortable.
The unforgettable beauty of Aldabara's reefs, its abundance of life, and the ability for our staff to develop critical skills makes working within the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program an incredible experience.
There are so many things that excite me about being part of the reef monitoring program at Aldabra, and one thing is, of course, the diving. Diving at Aldabra, a place that is so far away from everything and where not many people get to go, really is a privilege. It always is a little adventure to go around the atoll and dive and do the surveys, where we see so many sharks, so many turtles, and such a diversity and huge abundance of fish. Of course, another aspect of the excitement of the monitoring now is seeing the recovery of Aldabra's reefs after the bleaching event.
There's things that here in Mahe you cannot see, and like on Aldabra there's things I've seen that I don't know if I'm ever gonna see it back, so yeah.
Completing each arm season without any major issues is a big achievement for me. Aldabra is remote and transport infrequent, so it's important to have a very good planning and to be flexible. And also, it makes me happy, and I'm grateful to see all the young Seychellois taking part, the young scientists, and returning back after each dives with so much excitement and big smile. So that's something really nice to see.
The Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program's findings have proven to be exceptional. They show the impressive post-bleaching recovery of Aldabra reefs and our ocean's potential, the main source of food for half the world's population, to recover. These results are being used by the Seychelles Islands Foundation and its partners as baseline information for the protection of Seychelles and the world's blue resources that not only feed us, but allow us to breathe and protect us from climate change. Consequently, while ARM offers exceptional views and a bucket list experience for divers, it is a serious and critical tool in our fight against climate change. The climate crisis will continue to destroy our ocean and threaten our way of life if we do not understand the ways in which we can help nature heal itself. SIF firmly believes we still stand a chance at saving Aldabra's reefs and the life that depends on them. You can play a role to help. You can also be a part of the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program, which takes place every northwest monsoon between October and January. If you are a qualified Seychellois diver and are willing to be contacted by us, please fill the Seychelles Marine Research Diver Database form on our website. If you want to know more about the ARM, you can follow our social media pages or sign up to our monthly newsletter.
If anybody wants to actually take part in it or ever are thinking of doing it or wants to do it later, like I would say, go for it. It's gonna be a great experience and you're gonna love it.
There is no regret. I did it for 2 years, so definitely anyone who has the opportunity to actually work there, it's going to be an experience that they will not get anywhere else. So definitely, yes, I will recommend that.
We hope the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program story inspires you to know more about our ocean and take action. Will you?
Okay, well, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and also you have learned quite a lot about the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program. And I'm sure you have a lot of questions about this program, but we will leave this to the end. For now, I will invite Dr. Anna and Emma for their presentation.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome everyone. I'm Anna. I'm Emma. And then we also have Mika here. So we are on Aldabra, and we're going to talk a bit about the reef monitoring project. And actually, I thought it's a bit more interesting now to talk about how we do things. What are the things that we actually need every year to do this monitoring program? So I start my presentation. I will share my screen. I hope you can see it.
Yes, we can see it, Anna.
Okay. All right. So practicalities of the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program. That's what I want to talk about. Really practical things. So, I mean, you all know how far away Aldabra is, and you surely also know that Aldabra is a pretty big place. In fact, it's one of the largest atolls in the world. In numbers, it is 34 kilometers wide and almost 15 kilometers high or long, if you will. And the lagoon is also very, very big. So it is 200 square kilometers. And something that we often tell guests or tourists that come to the atoll when we take them to have a look inside the lagoon is that you could fit mahi into the lagoon. That's how big it is. Just to give you a bit better idea of how large this place actually is. So coming to the reef monitoring, we have 12 reef monitoring sites, and you see that here are those red marked dots. There are 9 sites on the outer reef, so outside, and 3 sites inside the lagoon. And the research station where we are, you can see the little house. That's where we are located. There are several field camps also, but for now I only mark 1 because that's relevant for us too. So I mentioned we have 12 survey sites, but we have 21 survey sets that we need to get done every year, which means we have 2 different depths we survey on the outer reef, because we survey at 5-meter water depth, and then another set at 50-meter water depth. And inside the lagoon, which is very shallow in most places, the survey sites are 2 to 3 meters, 5 meters deep, so much shallower. So we have 21 survey sets that we need to get done every year. And we dive a maximum of 3 dives a day. That's simply to make sure that we all stay healthy and well. So we don't do more dives than that, because as you know, we're very far away and medical help is also very far away. And altogether, that means in theory, we could finish this monitoring in 7 days. So in theory, and practically that's not actually that easy, because we have to get to all those sites, of course. And there are a couple of sites, or actually most of the sites we can get to from the station. Sorry, I just saw this chat, that's why I was distracted for a second. So most of the sites we can actually reach from the station, which means we go out for the day, do as many dives as we can do, and then return back to the station in the evening. But there are also some sites for which it is more practical to stay on camp on this site here, which means we go there, do a couple of dives already, stay overnight, do a few more dives, and then stay another night and finish the rest of the dives if everything goes well. So it's not just the distance we have to travel and the time it takes to get to these sites, but it's also the environmental conditions that influence how quickly we can get things done and how long it takes us, really. So we do the monitoring sometime between October and November until January, so during the Northwest monsoon season, where the winds really come from the north, which means we have higher waves on that side of the atoll, which sometimes can make it a bit tricky as well for us when we dive. On the southern sides, it's often a bit easier at that time of the year. Although, you know, when you're prone to seasickness, bigger swell can also make you feel a bit squeezy then too. But we also have quite strong currents. So this one here is the main channel, and that's the biggest channel that connects the lagoon with the ocean. And around 60% of the water inside the lagoon is going through that channel. So maybe you can imagine how strong the current is. It is really strong sometimes. We also have a few other channels. Here, the smaller one there, and then a few smaller ones here on that side too. So all of this, the weather, the channels and the currents, but obviously also the tides, strongly influence on how much progress we can make in a certain period of time. So it takes us several weeks really to finish all the sites that we want to get to and finish all the surveys we want to get to. In fact, last year we had to do twice as many dives because we didn't have enough people to do the dives at the same time. So instead of 21 survey sets, or survey dives, we essentially did 42 survey dives. So it took us quite a bit more time. And now I want to talk a little bit about what we actually need for the monitoring. So of course we need a boat, which means we also need a skipper and a boat hand. We need divers. We need 4 divers really to get all the work done. Sometimes we have a few more people for training as well. Sometimes we also have researchers with us because it makes sense to do everything all together. But we also need a lot of on-land support. And this is the staff members here on Aldabra, so the ones that don't directly do the marine monitoring. But these people make sure, or these staff members make sure that everything else runs as normal. Because when we are out diving, we can't do the other work that has to get done on Aldabra, or the terrestrial monitoring, for example. So a lot of people have to cover a lot of work for us too. But that extends also to the head of the staff, so staff working on Mahe, because we need, of course, we need staff members that need to be recruited for the monitoring, but we also need all the equipment that has to be purchased. We have equipment on station that needs to be serviced, for example, our dive regulators, but also our compressor. All of these things that need to be organized, and that's our head of the staff. But we also have a bunch of equipment, and we want to show you a little bit some of the equipment. So I'm gonna stop my presentation for a second so you can see me. So maybe we start with our dive equipment. So we have here one of our regulators that is attached to a tank, a dive tank, which then enables us to breathe underwater. So I just put this on as if I'm diving now. So I have this at my back. This is a bit awkward. So then I have this regulator in my mouth to breathe. But we also need our dive jacket, our BCD. So that is this. Put it on something. So this is our dive jacket. We have to put this on because without it, we're just gonna sink. With all the equipment we have on, we are very heavy. So the dive jacket, we have to put air inside. So that's the same air that we breathe, but with a different hose, we can put air in the jacket so it can inflate, so that we don't get too heavy and can adjust our buoyancy underwater. Plus, it has a lot of pockets as well, which is really useful. Very important also is our tape measures. So I will show you after how we actually do our surveys, but we need our tape measures to actually orientate ourselves underwater and to make sure that we really survey the same distance every year. So it's all consistent and that we know exactly where we do our surveys and where we collect our data. So we always dive with 3 of these tape measures for our surveys. All attached to the BCD. And then we have our underwater slates. So that's basically like a plastic slate. And then you have a pencil as well, and you can write on the slate directly. But actually we use underwater paper, which is very useful. Then you can just put the paper already in the folder, and that's a second backup after you enter the data into the computer. Then my favorite, again, I will talk a bit about the surveys we do, but this is equipment we need to measure the size of young corals, of baby corals, if you will. And this can tell us exactly how many millimeters they are long. And what we also need is to dive, GPS. We also need our GPS, where we have the exact locations of our survey sites. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to find them very easily. So with the GPS, we know exactly where we go and where we have to drop into the water to find our sites again. Then we have our dive computer. So this is this one here. It tells us how deep we dive and how long we dive and a bunch of other things too. But this is quite a useful equipment and also ensures that we dive safely. Then we also have a compass, so we know in which direction we swim underwater, also very useful. And then we have our coral juvenile quadrat. Yeah. So the surveyor that counts and identifies the number of baby corals uses this, so we know the area in which we count these, which is important to standardize the data, to know exactly how many coral juveniles we have, for example, within a square meter. And then maybe I take the jacket off. Yeah. Then we also have our most bulky equipment here. That's our photo frame. So on here, we attach a camera, a GoPro we really need, and then it takes a photo of the ground. And again, it's a standardized area, so we know, for example, the percentage of corals that cover this area. And this is how we understand, for example, change over time. For example, how coral cover is changing over time. But it also tells us how the sites differ in their reef community. For example, is there a lot of coral? Is there a lot of algae or other benthic organisms? Benthic organisms, I mean the ones that grow on the ground. What we also have, and I realize now how much equipment we really need. We have our temperature loggers, so that record temperature underwater. And we also have a few tidal loggers. So they record water pressure, which can then be converted into tide height. So yeah, a few of these we have as well. Yeah, and we also take a knife on the water, not because we're scared or anything, but sometimes we really need that, especially if we exchange our temperature loggers, which are fixed to the side with a cable tie. Yeah, so when we have to change them over, we also, we also take a knife. Okay, So then I go back to sharing my screen. And how we do the surveys. So to ensure that we do the surveys and everything related to the monitoring is consistent through time, and that new staff and old staff all do the same thing, we have a bunch of protocols where all these things are written down. So everyone who's participating in the dive surveys or in the monitoring generally is going through at least some of these protocols to make sure that we all on the same page really. So just to run you through how we do the surveys. So I mentioned a few surveys already. We have the surveys that use the photo quadrat frame, the big bulky thing I showed you earlier. We have the surveys that count the number of baby corals or juvenile corals, but then we also have surveys that count the fish we see underwater and identify them. And our survey site, so this is just a little schematic really, with the sticks that are on the ground, are in reality rebars, so metal bars that we hammered onto the substrate to make sure that we survey the same location every year again. And we know where we have to start because we mark these, or we mark the first one of these with a flip-flop that we find washed up on the beach. I'm sure you all heard about ACAP, the Aldabra cleanup project, which is an example of how much really is washing up, or how much marine debris is washing up at Aldabra. And by item, most of it are flip-flops. So we have plenty of these flip-flops all the time. So we make use at least of some of them to mark the start of our transects. Because sometimes it's not easy to find these transects. Then I mentioned those temperature loggers. So on some of these sites we have them and they are attached to a heavy concrete block so they don't float away. And the order of the survey, so we have 4 divers, 2 divers are doing the fish surveys and 2 other divers are doing the coral juvenile and the benthic photo surveys. And the fish surveys start first. So we have one person that goes down along the transect ahead and starts counting fish already. And then the second diver follows with one of the tape measures that I showed as well, and lays behind the fish surveys a transect tape. And that person actually has to carry a lot of stuff as well, because we don't do only one transect, we do 3 transects. So that person needs 3 tape measures. So the fish surveyor goes ahead and the person laying the transect tape goes behind. And the reason we do it like this is that the person with the transect tape doesn't scare away the fish that the fish surveyor wants to count. And following these people, we have our benthic surveyors. So on the right side, you see the diver with that bulky photo quadrat frame who goes along the transect line and takes photos. As a buddy, so as a dive buddy, the other person is taking the other quadrat and goes along and counts the number of coral juveniles on the reef as well. And when the benthic surveyors are done, so they don't actually have that much time because they have to be off the area, away from that area by the time the fish surveyors come back. So I mentioned that the person that lays the transect tape might scare away fish, and that's why we count the fish that get scared faster first. But when the fish surveyors come back, they count the smaller fish that don't get really scared, and then they can finish the transect. So the transect tape is being reeled back in and the surveys are done. So that's one of those 21 surveys done. So then we can go to the next slide. And I want to tell you or show you some photos actually to, illustrate it a bit better. So here you see on the left a person actually doing a benthic a photo, and on the right side on the photo on the slide you see how it actually looks like when we then go and analyze these photos, because obviously we can't just collect them, we also have to analyze them. So we have this program that we use that assigns randomly on this photo points, and then we go and identify what's under these points. And from them, we get the data that we can then analyze actually. So for each season, we collect around 1,700 to 2,500 photos. So that's quite a lot of photos. And in total, since we started the Aldabra Reef monitoring program in 2014, we have collected 15,000 photos, which is also quite a lot. And then looking at the photo analysis, so the dives is one side, but the analysis also takes quite some time. And depending on how many photos we have, it takes 50 to 100 hours of photo analysis per season. It's quite a lot of effort. So in total, we have spent almost 390 hours of photo analysis so far. And I tried to calculate it a bit. It's around 16 days just doing that, not sleeping, not eating, just doing that, 16 days, quite a long time. Let's look at the fish surveys as well. So the numbers are not so high. We do around 60 fish surveys per season. And so far we have 317 surveys completed so far, which is still quite a lot. And this is around, so per season, sorry, in total it's around 100 hours of diving per person. And through these surveys so far, we have counted around 55,000 fish, which also surprised me a bit when I looked this number up. Then when we look at coral juveniles, we have collected, well, 315 the maximum. That's what we aim for every season. So per season, collecting around 300 coral juvenile quadrats. So far, we have collected 1,400 quadrats since the monitoring started. And in total, we counted 5,500 young corals in these frames. So also quite a lot. And what I've not mentioned so far is what you also saw in the video a bit, is that we also do baited remote underwater videos. So here you see a person in action on the boat, and the red circle shows you a part of the equipment that we use here. So the remote underwater video system is basically a frame or a metal rig that you see on the photo, and it has a bait canister that's circled in red attached to it at the front. And we fill this with fish guts that is left over from our subsistence fishery. So it's quite stinky on the boat actually when we do these surveys. And then on the other end of the frame, we have a camera attached. So then we deploy the whole thing, put it underwater at different sites, and leave the video running for an hour. And then we pull it all up again after an hour, and then we get beautiful photos like that. So we have obviously the juicy guts in front in the bait canister, and all sorts of predators are attracted to that nice smell. So here, for example, we have a lemon shark. There are 2 more lemon sharks, but then we also see, groupers, and also other sharks and rays as well. So that's also a very interesting monitoring program. And of course, following all of this field work, there is a lot more to do. So I mentioned already how long it takes to analyze all the photos we collect. But that's only one part of, the data analysis, but then also the write-up of the data into our internal SIF report. So here you see all the covers of the past reports we've written over the years. So the reef monitoring program, all in all, really is not just a big team effort, but for the ones that are involved heavily, is almost a year-round activity. If you think of the field work, the preparations, but then also the data analysis and the write-up. And now I think I spoke a lot. So thank you. And now let's start with our questions. Do we have any questions? Okay, I see there's a hand raised. Yes. I can't hear you. Are you still muted, maybe? Still can't hear you.
I think there might be an issue with the microphone. I think, Panlang, if you want to type your question in the chat.
It's a nice question. Well, I mean, we see sharks, which for some is very exciting. Actually, for most of us, it is very exciting when we see sharks, but not scary. So, you know, when we see sharks, most of the time, they swim away very, very quickly. So they see us, but they zoom off already. So they are more afraid of us than we actually of them. What else we see? Sometimes we're very lucky and we see manta rays. And of course, we don't have to be afraid of them at all because they can't even hurt us. And that's always a very special treat and super exciting. And it happened before that we had to do the survey again because everyone was too distracted. So that's very, very lucky if we see that. But, you know, we see sharks a lot and also turtles. Green turtles and also hawksbill turtles. So quite a bit that we see. Yeah. Invasive species. So, I mean, of course, there is a risk of marine invasive species as well, but for us to pick up on that, it's probably a bit more difficult than terrestrial invasive species. So you probably know about the problem of invasive species, otherwise you wouldn't ask that question. And that is a very big concern for us here for the terrestrial ecosystems. And we have a lot of measures in place to make sure that we don't even have them arriving on the atoll. So we do strict biosecurity on all the items that are coming to Aldabra. If it's, for example, our supplies on the supply boat, but also personal items, as well as luggage that comes with staff and also visitors. Then if we have invasive species, which, you know, we had on Aldabra so far. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, the question was, I would like to ask, how would you deal with any invasive species? I don't want to mumble on to that too much about this.
But you want to say anything?
I think you mentioned everything already. Like Anna said, we have a lot of measures in place biosecurity wise. So our team at head office, they do a really good job at, checking all of everything that comes on the island as much as possible, just to stop any invasives from coming. And also we do a few monitorings, like egg monitoring, when we place lures to see if we have any YCA or other invasive entities. So yeah.
More questions?
Any more questions?
Our question is, how do you guys make sure that the
Can you say that again? We didn't hear that.
how do you guys make sure that the fish analysis is accurate?
Accurate. You mean the analysis or the surveys themselves?
Both of them.
So yeah. So for the surveys, we have a protocol in place that makes sure that we do it, the same way every year. But we also make sure that the staff that do the surveys are properly trained. So, for example, we make it a little bit easier by only looking at indicator species. So we don't survey or we don't count all the fish we see underwater. We count a certain set of fish that gives an indication of certain things that could be happening on the reef. So that makes it much easier for new staff to learn the fish, because if you only have to learn 70 species, it is much easier than learning 300 species. And then we also do on land training initially, but then we also do underwater training. So for fish identification, but also for sizing of fish. So what we also do, we don't just count the fish, but we also estimate their size. And we do training by having a set of differently cut PVC pipes. So then we literally just have someone holding these pipes and the other person learning is estimating the length. And we also do that underwater. So that's how we make sure that the surveys are consistent. And then like if you have consistent data, then obviously your analysis, it depends on that, on the consistency of the data. So there are certain statistical measures that you can use to look at count data like that. And that's what we use to analyze the data and present the results in the reports as well. And maybe I go with the question that came through the chat first. Oh, there are a few questions. Okay. There's one question, what type of program do you have for students? I'm not entirely sure how you mean that, but we don't have specific programs for students as of yet. So everyone that's here right now with SIF is a staff member working for SIF. So that's pretty much the most straightforward way how you can get involved in the monitoring programs, even like, terrestrial or marine or other kind of work on the atoll too, not just monitoring.
But you can get here if you join EcoSchool. For a few years, it has not happened because of COVID, but EcoSchool is still active and you can still participate to get the chance to come to Aldabra and just see what we have to do. So that's one way, I guess, that students can make it here. Yeah.
Okay, I see there's still a hand raised from Plaisance. Okay, then I go further with the questions from the chat. So there's another one. Ooh, so many questions now. Since the island is far enough from other islands, are you affected by pollution? And if so, how do you deal with it? I assume you mean by pollution like anything that comes from the sea. So yeah, I mean, indeed, we are very far away. The closest island is Assumption, which is like 30 kilometers, right? Like, yeah, around 30 kilometers away from Aldabra. And there's also not a big presence of humans there. The closest land, again, is 400 kilometers away from Aldabra, and that's Madagascar. It's like 450 or something like that. So we don't know of any sources of pollution that's reaching or directly affecting Aldabra's ecosystem from, you know, other areas. We don't know that, but obviously the ocean is a big connected system, so we can't completely exclude impacts of on the ocean in other areas too. But for now, that's something we don't know. And I think we can safely say it's quite far away, or major sources of pollution are very, very far away. So I doubt that there's a very big impact on Aldabra's ecosystems. Then how will you deal with a virus or disease spreading among the marine life? Luckily, I can say that that's something we haven't encountered yet. So we do obviously our marine surveys every year, and we would pick up on anything, you know, like a coral disease, things like that, anything that looks unusual, because we do dive every year doing the monitoring, but also other times we go diving and we have a look out for these things. So luckily, so far, we haven't seen viruses or diseases. If it comes to that, I guess we have to contact people that are expert in, you know, marine disease, like coral diseases, for example. There are a few expert groups across the world that will be able to advise us. Okay. Maybe I get a question from Ladig or Point Larry. Otherwise, I continue with the questions from the chat. Ladig?
What role can we play as students in conserving the corals?
Can you repeat that?
What role can we play as students in conserving the corals?
So you probably know that the biggest threat for basically all ecosystems on Earth is climate change. So we all play a role in conserving not only corals, but also other ecosystems. So by reducing our own impact or our own footprint to reduce the impact of climate change, we can help conserve corals. But in a more direct way, you can also help by, for example, picking up rubbish that you find on the beach or on the street, that it doesn't end up in the ocean and gets entangled in the corals, for example. You can also, you know, reduce your meat consumption, which has an impact on, you know, how much fossil fuels are being burned and impacts the climate as well. You have some ideas?
I feel like one big thing as well is educating yourself more and your friends and your family, because, you know, it doesn't only take one person, it takes everyone to make a difference. So educating people about, you know, what affects the corals and what we can do is also a big role.
Okay, then I go on with some of the questions in the chat. What are some of the threats you face while diving? So they are not very different to you know, diving anywhere else in the world, really. sorry, I was distracted for a second. Some of the threats here are, I guess, the strong currents we have. So I mentioned the main channel, for example, the current can be very strong. So for some that can be very challenging dive conditions, but that's why we plan our dives in a way that that the currents are not that strong. Other threats, of course, you know, if you don't dive or if you don't plan your dive conservative enough, you can have the usual threats that you can have when you dive. Decompression sickness or fatigue. Diving makes you very tired as well. So you need to have enough rest. So after a few days of diving, we also have a day where we don't dive just to, you know, recover a bit from it. But other than that, really the threats here are not very different than anywhere else. Saying that though, we do dive more conservative than you would probably do on Mahe, simply because we don't have medical facilities very close by. So we have to just make sure that everyone's safe and well. So another question we have, how long are the training for the reef monitoring program? So that really strongly depends on on the qualification and the experience of the people that come here to dive. So of course, if someone comes who has extensive experience already, then the training doesn't take very long. And sometimes it's really just a few, you know, like a check dive or, you know, like a little test on land even. And it also depends on what monitoring you do. So if you do the Benthic photo surveys, the training really involves just handling the equipment underwater, because we saw how big the frame is, and it's underwater, it's quite heavy. So you have to be a very fit diver. You have to be very experienced and comfortable underwater. Whereas if you, for example, want to do the fish surveys, you have to identify, or you have to know all the fish that you see underwater. So you have to learn them, or if you already know, just refresh them. So it really depends on, you know, who's participating and what the experience level is. The next question is, have you ever discovered any new species while diving in Aldabra, and if so, what are they? Unfortunately, myself not, and I don't think anyone really of the team has, which, I mean, would be very exciting to find something new, but we have not. The next question, what was the most shocking species you have seen while diving?
Well, for me, it was manta rays. So on one of our dives in the last season, we just saw 2 reef mantas just, you know, gliding alongside us and just coming close to us when we're diving. So I think like it wasn't shocking, but like very exciting and overwhelming, because we knew that they were around in that area. I hadn't seen them when I was diving. So that was like the most fun.
Yeah, the manta rays are always amazing. So then the last question I have for now in the chat: what were the emergency procedures to prevent COVID-19 from spreading among the staff from Aldabra? So, I mean, I guess preventing it from coming here in the first place really that's the key. So before anyone comes to the atoll, they have to take a test, you know, just before the flight, a day before at least. And staff also have to be vaccinated. So that's now in place like that. But before the vaccination was available, we had actually staff coming in January last year, and we had the team separated for 2 weeks. So all the new arrivals were in one part of the station, just to monitor everyone and make sure that everyone is fine, whilst the staff that were already on station was on the other side, basically. So during that time, we didn't cross ways really, just to make sure that nothing is spreading to anyone and that everyone stays healthy. And so far, it worked really well for us. So fingers crossed it stays like that. Are there any more questions?
Okay. If there's no other question, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope that you have learned new things about Aldabra and also about some of the monitoring that the staff undertakes on the atoll. So this classroom is under the Communication for Change project, and it aims at bringing you closer to the research work on the atoll. So it was great talking to you today, and hope that you will be inspired to work on the atoll someday. So thank you very much, and hope to see you working on Aldabra one day. Thank you, everyone.